Hey, Alice.
I know, I'm just messaging Doug.
How are you?
I'm good, how are you?
I'm good. It's a bit warm here, but good.
Where are you? Sorry, I always ask this, so terrible memory.
Sorry, what?
Where
Wow,
where
where
are
am
you?
I? Sorry, I am originally from. Yeah, I know that I look a bit not synced with where I live. I'm originally from Cairo, Egypt. That's maybe why I look a bit Middle Eastern. And
No, I just meant I forget where you're located.
no, no, it's fine. It's
Yeah.
it's very fine. And by the way, I'm most of the time, like 99%, I'm joking. So don't take me
All
serious.
right.
But I'm married and I live in the Netherlands. We are in the middle of moving from almost the middle of the Netherlands, but we're going more to the south where my wife grew up. So
Oh, very cool.
yeah,
Yeah. Well, that'll be nice. Hopefully. Is it nice I don't know. I've been to the Netherlands a couple of times, but not enough
yeah.
to be able to say like which bits of it are nice, the
Ah,
nicest.
I believe you mostly went to Amsterdam and the
Yeah.
touristic places. And
Hmm.
it's cool, of course, there, but it's not. It's like when you go to Paris for France or London for England. It
Yeah.
it, it doesn't show well, of course, shows part of the life, but it's not
Hmm.
the everybody everyday life. So
Hmm.
no, it's more quieter. Even in the south, even more quieter and less like smaller cities. Utrecht, for example, where I'm living now, and Amsterdam are bigger. Also part of an area where most of the people tend to go there to live and work.
I'm sorry, no, I'm
No,
just distracted because I need to send Doug the details.
I fully understand.
But
Yeah, I
but
think the difference is it's asked that you have to have an account.
oh, is
Then,
that right?
yeah, then the other one for the OCI weekly call, bi-weekly call.
Got it. And I just had another message on LinkedIn from Anton, who I don't know.
Here he is.
Here we have Doug, and we also have Nathaniel. This is
Hey, Doug.
cool. Glad to see some people
Hey, Natalia.
on the
Nice
call.
to meet you.
I was just saying, Doug, I had a message from someone on LinkedIn saying they're just on their way, trying to update Zoom. I think it's usually a few tech hurdles before you can get onto a Zoom call. You never know what they're going to be, though. It's usually a sort of random. You're on mute, Doug. Sorry.
Yeah, it hasn't appeared in my calendar, so presumably I missed an invite on that. So that's where I normally get things because Zoom has permission to read the calendar.
Yeah, it is currently not really an invite call,
Okay,
although I'm certainly because it's owned by the OCI,
right.
so it's in the shared OCI calendar. Um, it might be possible. Like I just copied it into my
Right.
calendar.
Well, if you can give well, maybe all of us point us to that, then that copying
Yeah,
it into my
it's
local calendar sounds like the right thing.
it's on the README.
Okay.
So there's a link on the README that says View on OCI Calendar, and you can either go in there and just copy it, or you know, create your own instance, I suppose, with the same details. But it's probably
Okay.
easier to
I'll
just
do that.
copy. But I can definitely. Well, just while we're waiting for
No, I'll
Anton.
check out the README later on.
Okay, all right, cool. Um, so should we do some intros? I don't know if you all know Nathaniel. I don't know if we've met before. I'm sorry,
I've
I haven't done it
literally
correctly.
just hopped on from a LinkedIn post that
Oh,
wasn't even
nice.
someone I follow. Uh, FreeBSD head since the 90s and just curious.
Cool.
Well, it's great to have you here. I hope there's something here for you to be interested in. Are you, Nathaniel, are you interested in trying out Podman on FreeBSD?
Definitely. I just like I said, I literally just came across something on LinkedIn and went, well, I've I've done a lot of virtualization work in the past, and haven't done it on FreeBSD, which is odd because that's home, right? I'm happiest sitting on a BSD system and look for BSD systems as solutions, but often end up somewhere else. So in lieu of hitting Proxmox with a hammer until I cry, I would love to try something on the FreeBSD side.
That's awesome. Well, it's great
Okay.
great to have you here, and this seems like the right forum for doing something like that. Anton, I don't know if you'd like to say introduce yourself a little to the group.
Yeah, absolutely. So, hi everyone, Anton Wally. I'm in the middle of establishing a startup around edge compute. Okay, so cloud's dead. It's very boring. Everything's going out to the edge now, folks. In case you didn't read the memo, yeah. So doing that, spending a lot of time in Podman and using Podman as a base system to deliver that. I spent a lot of time. Previous life, I was spent the last 8 years before I started the startup with IBM. A lot of work in Kubernetes, seeing the problems that Kubernetes has in that type of in edge scenarios and in small, relatively small form factor type scenarios, and very interested in picking up driving Podman adoption across platforms. And FreeBSD would be a very interesting next target. Like, there's a lot of really good edge use case. I think obviously stuff that Netflix is doing. I was over in France for BSD 2017. Got talking to George Neville Neal, and he was definitely espousing the benefits of doing, or one of the targets that FreeBSD should have is edge environments, because there's a lot of differentiation we have there in terms of stability, et cetera, and that really kind of hit home. There was some work that the Dutch guy was doing around cloud ABI compatibility, and there was really interesting work, but that was kind of over there, and that sort of fell into WASM, which was really good as well. I do a bit of work in and around WASM, but right now in terms of production workloads, very focused on Podman. So currently right in the middle of the weeds with it on RHEL, quite deep on it on that. I've done some interesting use cases, putting Podman in space, working with the European Space Agency, that type of thing. So like extreme edge scenarios, and hopefully I bring some of that kind of industry use case practicality aspects to this conversation.
That's great.
I can code a little bit, do a little bit of C, a little bit of Rust, not much Go really, which is surprising considering how much I hang around that ecosystem. But yeah, that's me.
Awesome. No, it's great to have you here. I wonder if Doug, you would say a little bit about your work. Doug is the person who's been doing all this wonderful work with Podman.
So yeah, I'm an old school FreeBSD guy. I date back to the 90s, like a few other people I know. And I've worked on all kinds of things with FreeBSD. But over the last 10 years, I've been spending a lot of time in industry, mostly using Linux, doing large scale or container orchestration type stuff at places like Google and Facebook. Not using any of the standard stacks, but the same concepts. And I wanted FreeBSD to be able to do this kind of stuff. And I came across Podman and I thought, reckon I could port that one. Because I knew that it was possible because Docker had a jail-based port that didn't last, but it was theoretically possible. And then Samuel Karp came up with an OCI runtime for FreeBSD based on jails. And I thought, well, it definitely can be done. So I was bored with working for industry, so I decided to go off on my own and port the Podman stack and zoom forward to today, and it works pretty well. It only supports rootful, so you have to be root to run it. But that's okay. You can run a lot of stuff that way. And it supports a wide selection of the Podman feature set. Not all of the kind of nooks and crannies of C group special cases and things like that. But it's good enough to, certainly good enough to evaluate. And for, depending on your use case, I think it's good enough for careful use in production. And continuing from that, I know that people have mixed feelings about Kubernetes out, but just because it's possible, I'm also working on a port of the Kubernetes stack. A lot of it doesn't need porting. It's the control plane just works. But I've got prototypes, ports of the kubelet and kubeadm and kubeproxy, which makes it possible to bring up small scale Kubernetes cluster, which I think is pretty cool. I'm not sure how useful it will be for most people. I think the FreeBSD project would like to use something like that for continuous integration testing. So that's me.
Thanks, Doug. I'll do a very quick intro set of myself. So I'm Alice, I'm based out of the UK. I'm working on behalf of the FreeBSD Foundation doing program management work, but I do have a background in cloud native. I worked for a couple of startups, one of which was persistent storage for Docker containers back in 2015 or something like that. And most recently, I worked in developer relations at Equinix, who obviously have a sort of a bare metal offering as well as other bits and pieces. But I'm here facilitating this work at the moment, so not here to support the technical side of things, but definitely here to support the running of this particular test project. And I'm most easy to get hold of UK afternoons, Monday to Thursday, but I try to respond outside of that, but those are my working hours. Noor, do you want to introduce yourself briefly?
Yeah.
Or not briefly?
Yeah, well, it is very brief. So I'm pretty new to the FreeBSD community, both on usage and basic, not really, I cannot say really contributing, more volunteering. In my day job, I'm a software engineer, mainly Java, Python, JavaScript, the normal or the usual suspects, as they say, using containerized workloads. All of them are Linux based. And just like Doug, I was wondering, because I also knew a bit about the JS technology from FreeBSD, why it's not getting more attention and that it gets the same widespread support and usage like in the case of Linux. And I got to know about the Doug's work mainly from some articles. And one day I found that they're starting actually more to look into the support in an official way. Got hooked into the calls, and kindly they gave me a task of supporting the native arc, which is the network stack or the network container networking implementation for Podman. They're moving away from CNI plugins, through which I'm learning a lot about Rust as well, and a bit about Go, but mainly reading because I need to learn about what Podman is actually using, and also the work from Dog. Some of it, specifically the CNI plugins, are in Go as well. That's basically it.
Oh, thanks, Noor. So this is an office hours. It's pretty open how we want to use it. Probably looking at Anton and Nathaniel, what would you like to know about the test project? How can we help you? What are your goals? How would you like to use this time?
Nathaniel?
I'm diving into the reading side. So my use case is probably not the important piece right now, because the folks I work with and clients at this point are nonprofit orgs with limited resources. So I'm thinking of it more along the lines of how I could use this to help data journalists deploy data that needed a higher level of security than maybe some of the other options have. Because often they're running with public data, but occasionally they need to be able to deal with data sets that are more sensitive than that. So I'm always looking for other options than just them throwing up a Heroku instance or something on AWS to process stuff. So that's kind of why I hopped on, was just another option. Right now, the stuff I've got, it's not unmaintained, but it's not to the extent that I would trust it with a data set that wasn't yeah. And it's it's not that what I have isn't working, it's that my users seem to be able to break it in ways that I don't think would be the case on FreeBSD. For some reason in my mind, I still have the idea that a user wouldn't be able to take down networking on the host machine using Docker if it was on FreeBSD.
That's interesting. I have had people tell me that the main focus for Docker containers and basically the OS level virtualization wasn't security, it was just isolation. And so I know that they've probably spent a lot of time and effort to close up those loopholes. And but for secure workloads in containers on Linux, lightweight virtual machines are the way to go. So like Kata containers or gvisor perhaps, because they have a much clearer separation between the host and the workload. On the FreeBSD side, jails are not perfect either. They've had their problems in the past, and we do, respond to problems and work through fixing them, but nothing is perfect. With this current state of the play on FreeBSD Podman, or FreeBSD containers in general, it's just with jails. I have a long-term what's the right word? Ambition to support containers in VMs using Beehive, but that's not something which I'm working on right now. So for security, I would think that Linux containers with virtual machines might be a better fit for you, but I don't know your use case in detail. Does that help?
For sure. As somebody who literally wandered in here off the quote unquote street, I appreciate answering my half-assed question.
By no means half-assed. It's an interesting area of concern, and there's a lot of active research going on in that area around make my attestation so that you can have some level of proof that the thing you think you're running is the thing you wanted to run, that it hasn't been modified along the way. So there's a lot of research going on with this. It depends how hostile your workloads are.
Mostly they're nice and boring, but it's just those edge cases that I'd like to be ready for beforehand, before someone walks into the room and goes, "Hey, we've got this thing." The last time that happened, I didn't find out till the movie came out that we were our sources were actively being attacked with state level tools. I'm like,
ouch.
I'd like to know earlier next time, guys.
Yeah.
Now I want to know which movie it was.
The Grab is what it's called. It's a documentary, came out.
I see.
Might be on Netflix actually next week, I think.
Yeah, and I think in terms of how I would think, I don't know, health is the right word, but like to play back something actually you said, Nathaniel, is around like about 5-6 years ago. I ran the FreeBSD Dublin community, and we used to do kind of workshop type things where we like test out a piece of technology in the FreeBSD stack and this, that, and the other. And there was very few actual FreeBSD aficionados there. It was very much people kind of just strolling past and folks we know around the community and sort of application developer level folks, and it was really, really apparent quite a lot in the FreeBSD landscape was very, very sysadmin orientated and not particularly orientated into development itself, the software development, application development, and sort of bridging that gap between them. So that's kind of one of the reasons why I'm sort of really interested in supporting this. I've kind of seen it firsthand, that this mismatch between kind of the facilities that Linux can offer from an application developer point of view, and Linux itself isn't perfect. It's not got it nailed. There's still a lot of people out there, application developers that want to use Windows. It's back on the rise. I see it all over the place, and to the point where people want all the container stuff to run on Windows and want it all to work the same way. But anyway, I digress. In terms of what I'm hoping to be able to offer is pretty much what I've started off doing, which is I'm using certain features of Podman in the use cases that I'm seeing in production or soon to be production type environments. Just testing those out in FreeBSD and putting the issues in. That's kind of what I've been up to. And Doug, I know you've jumped in on me today, and that's great. Like as I get an opportunity to go and test, and if there's anything specific that I see, and I'll feedback. Like I say, ultimately the goal is to have that right now, is to have compatibility or the ability to deliver the platform I'm building on FreeBSD. I think right now I'm not targeting it. I've got specific areas, but the next sort of branch area I'm going to take the platform to is network devices. Like there's a lot going on in telco and network devices, and being able to deploy workload there. And I'm thinking of all the network devices that run FreeBSD, to be able to deploy workloads there that do interesting things will be interesting, I'm pretty sure,
Yeah. So in terms of compatibility, FreeBSD 13.2 and later should have good support. There wasn't much that needed changing in the base operating system to get this stuff to work. There was a couple of added features for mounting files into jails. There was a feature gap in PF that made some port remapping not work correctly. Those went in quite a long time ago, and they got merged back to the 13 branch. They're in 13.2 and later. Sweet spot is probably 14 these days. 13 is coming towards the end of its life. But if your customer has FreeBSD 13 machines that are new enough, then you can still do stuff there.
Yeah, definitely. I'll be thinking about providing it as a full stack. So on the Linux side, I'm working with some enterprise vendors that you could probably name, given the fact that I'm originally from IBM. I mean, no mysteries there. But yeah, looking to white label some of that technology and come in, because the folks I'm working with aren't particularly interested in the operating system. They're interested when it goes down. But the internals of that layer, I think cloud has provided an abstraction where there's a myriad of application developers that just don't care if it's Linux or what it is, what you're deploying to. So then if you're under a different set of constraints, then it's like, okay, how often does this go down then? And that's where it gets kind of interesting. So I think so. Yeah, that's my plan anyway. Is to keep it a bit. There's components in the platform. There's things I want to do around virtual application networking with Scupper that I want to test out with this, and once I have that in place for the other, I'll come back over and see how that plays out. I think it's going to be interesting, considering the difference between the two networking implementations. But I'll feed that in kind of as I get to it, and at least we'll know what it is, I think the other interesting technology that I'm using at the moment from the container space is bootc, and which is basically bootable containers. So they're stage 3 images that you can layer on top of a base boot image, and then it will boot into the container, and the delivery model for that from that point onwards is as a container. So basically you package up the operating system, and then you point it to a container registry, and you update the container registry, and it automates deploying the bare metal as well. And that has, I've been using that for the past 5-6 months, and it's completely changed the way I'm doing builds and doing operating system delivery. It's really, really, really good, and I think FreeBSD has a chance to do something really interesting there with ZFS. So right now they've cobbled, like, with the technology you've got with the having the containerization and the Podman instance in FreeBSD, and tying that up with the capabilities underlying with ZFS. There's definitely something super nice to do there. Yeah, they're all making a big song and dance over it over in Fedora land, and it is a brilliant feature, the right to make it. But you're just thinking, these components, and back to what some folks have been saying here, like, these components have been in the operating system for literally decades. Like, there hasn't been the right way to put them together, or even understanding in the industry of how we want them put together, to the point that you were saying about what some of the ISO stuff that's going on in terms of fast boot virtual machines and all that type of thing. I think that's going on. So anyway, they're the technologies I'm using in general, and that's the kind of thing I'm going to be researching in terms of the additional features outside of just running a container that I think are interesting for FreeBSD, and obviously for what I'm doing as well. So yeah, just expect lots of noisy issues in the repo.
That's fine, absolutely. That's one of the reasons why the repo's there.
Yeah.
What we're trying to do at this point, because Red Hat's been great at hosting this project, but they're absolutely not supporting it. So if we flood their issues in the upstream Podman repo, I think they'll get upset. Anyway, so at this point in the life cycle, then having our own repo where we can have a more isolated place to talk about specific FreeBSD issues, and obviously the fixes that come from that will get fed upstream, and we avoid the upstream community that have been supporting this from being flooded with things that they are not paid to care about.
Yeah, and we also want, we did want people to feel free to raise whatever issues they want, and just be very verbose and very free with just firing off issues as much as they can, and it's only us that care about it.
Yeah.
And if at the end of the 6 weeks or whatever we find it useful to keep the repo, we may keep the repo for a bit, and then potentially just shut it down once it becomes less and less relevant. Or maybe it's a useful thing and we keep it for longer, or we'll take a view on it. But yeah, it's more about the act of doing the testing rather than I found a bug, or I there's something specific to raise against the code base.
And it is possible that we find upstream bugs that affect both operating systems, and those absolutely can be translated into issues upstream. Yeah.
And so did anyone have any sort of practical questions about this sort of 6 weeks test period, like how to engage, what to expect, where to ask for help, anything like that? It's all in the README, but you're more than welcome to query it or ask again. No, I realised I sort of skipped over you, and I didn't include you as asking, whether you were likely to be doing a bit of testing in this time box.
My focus would be on two things, as basically understanding how the network stack that's based on CNI now works, which basically will test it also. So mainly in a container networking area, and similar tests run it against NetArc when it's working. So basically, it's like hopefully hitting two birds with one stone with doing that. So just to share a couple of ideas, there are some cases. For example, the current workloads that I have at work maybe run similar ones on FreeBSD. I have a book. Am I allowed to say branded names or something? And then that call?
No idea. Go ahead.
The book from, I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, Brendan Byrne, the guy who basically was very active into making Kubernetes happen. Just a sec. Designing distributed systems. Yeah, it's called Designing Distributed Systems, Patterns and Paradigms for Scalable, Reliable Services by Brendan Burns. One of the key figures who built the Kubernetes the project, and he used also to, I believe he used to work, definitely he used to work for Google. I think now he moved to Microsoft. And I think there will be some nice cases there if I just go through it and try to re-imitate the examples he's done mainly on I believe Docker, that to run it on Podman on FreeBSD and see what work, what not, and that's basically it.
Cool. Makes sense.
I hope this is just an idea I came to. Because I'm not sure if my current work will cover like cases like what Anton and Nathaniel will bring. So having a book like this, I think he tried to bring some examples from real world that he's seen and to lay out the ideas and principles. So I think there will be something there that will either hit the wall somewhere, or if we say it all works, that's also good advertisement about Podman on FreeBSD. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think as long as we've got a bit of diversity of what people are using it for, and we've got a sense of those real world scenarios, then that's going to give us plenty of feedback. Because it hasn't, I mean, you tell me if I'm wrong, Doug, but I mean, I don't think it's been really stress tested in this way before.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, I've done testing with it. I've run various different workloads, but I can't cover everybody's use cases. And along the way, I've fixed all kinds of things, but there are almost certainly more things to fix. And occasionally there are regressions, and so we need to double check that things continue to work over time. Long term, I have a plan to get FreeBSD into the Podman CI, but there are some hurdles that I need to get over first about having FreeBSD official base images. That unlocks a few things. I have a proposal for that, but I don't want to bother the FreeBSD release engineering team that would own this right now because they're in the middle of a release.
So bit of backstory, I would have done quite a bit in the Node community, and we helped the Node community with the BSD integration, and they run the CI. So BSD doesn't do the CI. Node does the CI. Node did the CI there. So
yeah. So I mean, with Podman, a large fraction of the test suite runs and works on FreeBSD, but all of the tests require a specifically crafted test image that has known contents that the test can work against. And I have a version of that for FreeBSD, but its base image is not one that's provided by the project. And there's a desire within the Podman maintainers that to have trustable images for all bases. And I haven't ticked those boxes. And I don't want them to particularly change the rules for me. So I have been working towards getting OCI images to be built as part of the FreeBSD release process. Taken a lot longer than I wanted it to, but I am actually part of the FreeBSD release engineering team. I'm in the right place to do this, and I have a draft proposal that I'm going to put up for review once FreeBSD 13.4 release is cut, which will be real soon now.
Great. So I misunderstood you there. I thought you were trying to get it into the BSD build system. You do have to do that, and then you want to give it to the Podman folks. That's great.
Yeah. We get the project to release base images with a provable provenance that come from FreeBSD.org, and then other people can then trust those to ship their own software. And for the Podman folk, their infrastructure could then quite easily build the test image that they can then have provenance for, that would support FreeBSD and CI. And their CI is running on Cirrus. We can have a Cirrus node while running on FreeBSD. We do that for cross builds. That there is some FreeBSD stuff going on in their CI already. I would like to get some integration testing running, and that's the long-term plan there. So it will happen, and that will help to defend against regressions. At least it builds all the time. It doesn't. There are occasional small bugs that appear though as they go through refactoring. The refactoring, there was a bunch of refactoring between Podman 4 and Podman 5 that caused some fallout, and we're still seeing some of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Hi, Greg. I ought to say hi to Greg, who's just shown up.
Hey,
Greg,
everyone. Sorry I was late.
Greg, hi.
Hello. Good seeing you all.
You're just here for moral support, aren't you, Greg?
Well, I wanted to tell you about the tests that I'm running, and no, I'm joking. Pretty much moral support if I can help,
Greg works with me, or I work with him, depending on how you like to look at it. Cool. So we've still got a bit of time. If anyone wants to, talk more about Podman on FreeBSD or anything related, I mean, we're all here.
I think the other thing I forgot to mention there is in terms of things that I'm interested, or not things that I'm interested in, like features that that I will be testing out is the Quadlet feature that's available in Podman. So Quadlet is very much tied to System D, but whatever about the whatever of that, the idea that you can specify a system management framework file that will manage the life cycle of your container infrastructure is very, very useful. And sort of I'm a big believer in sort of I love the Solaris SMF stuff, and whatever about System D, but would be very interested if anybody's got some initial thoughts on sort of service management in BSD today, where they think it's going, and how potentially it could be integrated with Podman. I'd be interesting to know that, because I know at the moment, basically said in Podman it's just a file. It's a good file parser that generates System D files. How would you provide that for FreeBSD?
So I can answer some of that. The service management in FreeBSD is uses. It's usually called RCD or RC.D, but it's basically shell scripts. Each service has a shell script which is named by the service. Either if it's part of the core system, it's in it, etc. RC.D. If it's on a port, it's usually in user local, etc. RC.D. And there's, while I say these are shell scripts, they don't have a lot of code in them because there's a common framework that has helpers to execute the different phases of the service. I could imagine generating those things, possibly with some additional framework libraries to make it easier to do this. I'm very unfamiliar with how Quadlet works, but I could imagine porting or providing something roughly equivalent to Quadlet that generates rc.d service files that could run containers with particular things. In terms of packaging container images with data for configuration, I think you're looking at Podman Play a little bit, which tends to, that's an interesting direction that works on FreeBSD. I use that locally. So that's another potential direction. But yeah, I'll try to understand a bit more about what Quadlet actually does and see how feasible it is to do something like it. It's not going to cover the whole feature set, but I think we can do something.
Yeah, that'd be good to get some feedback during this process, just on what your thoughts are there, and because that has been that's been a really, really useful feature for providing the systematic way, a relatively systematic way, because the files aren't overly structured, but it's a good way to manage multiple pods, know where they are, and what I found is when using Podman, especially with what I've been doing, is it's not just the Podman itself, it's how it integrates with the external tooling. So for example, sort of security controls, like whatever it's seam, EDR, whatever it is, how well it plugs into that type of scenario, and whatever toolings around the ecosystem. And it's a good time to do this because people are only starting to come back around to Podman, and there's still a lot of work. It's not like the Kubernetes ecosystem where it's kind of nailed on. Like Quadlet's the third iteration of service management that's been in Podman. It's relatively new, whereas they had other things before that, and they didn't have anything at all. And it was, how are they going to adopt Docker Compose and all this sort of shenanigans going on? So yeah, it's a kind of interesting space. But that sort of how well this integrates with third party is part of it as well. But I mean, ultimately, being in the Podman project and getting the build there and doing all that will buy you a lot of that anyway. So I wouldn't.
So I think that Podman Compose and Docker Compose and Podman Play live in the same kind of space, obviously completely different from each other. I believe that there is a sort of a Podman Compose work-alike, a plugin kind of thing. I haven't tried to port or run that, although if it works on Linux, I guess it would probably work almost unmodified for FreeBSD. It's not going to be doing anything too radical. So that might be worth looking at.
Sorry, I missed that, Doug. What was that called?
So I think there's a Podman plugin called Podman Compose that aims to be feature compatible with Docker Compose. I believe it would port quite easily, but I haven't even tried. My use cases, very small use cases, are filled by Podman Play, which works for me because I'm Kubernetes curious. Perhaps I'll regret that.
Yeah. And it'd be interesting now, just thinking about it, because some of the system D stuff that I mentioned there, the Quadlet stuff, you can put play files in there.
All right.
Yeah, it'd be, like I say, it'd be interesting to get your thoughts on it, like I say, over the next few weeks. Yeah,
I'll have a look and see if I can get a better idea about how it actually functions. I will say that System D is not coming to FreeBSD anytime soon. That's very, very unlikely. OpenRC might happen, but definitely not System D.
Yeah, I think.
Well, I think the upstream is actively hostile at porting it to anything other than Linux anyway, so that would be hard.
Yeah, I think Michael Lawler wrote the book on it, System D, and he did an erotic murder of mystery. And he was in France as well. It was well timed, and he was selling it in France. So everybody left the conference with System D books, System D murder mystery books.
He's a funny guy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so Quadlets. People like Quadlets. Okay, that's good information. Any idea why it's called Quadlet? That was never clear to me.
No.
There must be some kind of 4 things that are important that fit together.
Yeah. Yeah. Doesn't come to mind.
Anton, are you based in Dublin?
Yes.
Oh, we have our EuroBSD Con in Dublin coming up. Whether you're familiar with that.
All too familiar. So David and Tom Smith are organising, and I've been volunteered in for the socials. So I'll probably be guiding people around the dark side of Dublin on Wednesday evening, Thursday evening, wherever during the evening. I'm the evening person for that, and obviously I'll be around. I'll be around for a couple of the different sessions, but I've actually got a lot on at the moment, obviously with the company kicking off. So yeah, I won't be able to dedicate the 4 days, but I will be in and around it. Yes.
Cool. Well, we might see you, those of us that are going.
Sadly, I'm not going to be able to make it to EuroBSD Con, which is silly because it's so close to me. But yeah, it's not going to happen. Maybe next time.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Where are you based, Doug?
London. Yeah, London, North London, if that makes it, if that is easier to picture. So, if you've ever spent time in the city.
Bits. We used to travel over quite a bit when I was, with IBM. I covered UK as well, and obviously passed through it a few times.
It might be worth also mentioning that we meet every second week just to talk about the runtime extension. So it's a working group. The FreeBSD runtime, I can't say it, runtime extension, OCI runtime extension. If anyone's interested in sort of learning more about the work that goes on behind the scenes with this, it's a public meeting. It's in the OCI calendar. So if you click in the README to look at the OCI calendar, it'll be in there. The next one's Monday the 9th at the same time as this one, but just the day before. And this one's every week from now until the middle of October, and then we'll just have to do async if people are still working on things. Cool. Does anyone want to talk about anything more, or should we close and let people have a break for whatever the next thing is, which will undoubtedly be in 9 minutes' time? That's the way things work. All right, I guess we close them. Thanks, everyone. Feel free to keep in touch async. We have a Slack. All the details are in the README. Drop your issues into the repo. We'll take a look at them. And yeah, if you can make it next week, that'd be awesome to see you and see how you've been getting on.
Cool. Cool.
I think the recording gets published by OCI at some point, so keep an eye out for that. I haven't been part of that before, so we'll see how that works. All right, take care now. Thanks, folks. Bye.
Bye.